All right, welcome back to Earth Force Training Day 2. We hope that you learned a lot on your first day and you had some time to work on your case studies. And again, right now, moving forward, it's just going to be a sharing time to kind of walk through the process so that you're a little bit more comfortable, a time to ask questions and give feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Natalie because she's going to highlight a little bit about RISE.
Yeah, so before we jump into steps 4 and 5 and do our case studies and stuff, or nope, 5 and 6 and do our case studies and stuff like that, I am going to introduce the RISE Challenge to everybody. And the RISE Challenge is it's Earth Force, but it adds a competition and a student summit and project implementation into it, with the added payback of potentially getting funding for projects that you do. And so basically, it takes your Earth Force framework that you're already experts at after your one-day class. You know everything about Earth Force, and now you can go ahead and say, oh, I think I could definitely know what I can do with my class. I think I'd like to contribute to the RISE Challenge. And with that, you can potentially gain funding. Anybody who submits a proposal to the RISE Challenge will help, EEAI will help get funding for your project implementation. And that sounds really complicated. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. And this is a presentation in a PDF. And so I'm like it's like real quick on the trigger with the changing pages. So I'm sorry if I have to go backward and forward a little bit, but just like Earth Force, RISE Challenge is open to any Illinois educator. You don't have to have a formal classroom. You can have a small group. You can have a region. You can have a Boy Scout troop. You can have a group of concerned students that meets after class. It doesn't really matter. Who you are it can be open to just about anybody, but it is better suited for middle school and high school aged students. As far as like your benefits for adding this extra element, you gain a lot of those resources that you have during Earth Force, but RISE and EEAI will help match you up with these subject matter experts. I don't know why I put that in quotations, because they are very much subject matter experts, no quotation. I would be a subject matter expert in that I know some stuff about it, but they are actual experts. And RISE has partnerships with things with like FEMA, and I'm going to get it's the Association for River Soil Runoff. I'll get there. I think I have it written down somewhere. Soil runoff, watersheds, something like that. And it has this whole network of experts that can help you connect your students for expertise, or maybe data, or maybe just having somebody that can consult on the project, things like that. And then, of course, funding at the bottom. So anybody that submits a proposal, and that proposal is basically your project idea. And you send it to RISE and you say, I'm going to do this. I would like to, our classroom would like to do this. Our group would like to do this. Here's our proposal for what we would like to do. If it gets approved, yay, then you'll help EEAI develop a budget, and they can help fund those project supplies if you need any. Sometimes projects are free, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? Or they need paper, things like that. But sometimes projects can be more expensive, and you want to do something a little bit more in depth. And that can sometimes seem a little daunting as, you know, just an average teacher or just an average person that already has a limited budget. You don't want to be adding more things. And this eliminates that need to do any fundraising or find donors or anything like that. As far as the benefits to students, because of that added element of competition and public presentation, they're gaining skills that they literally could put on a resume, on a college application, on a school club, anything like that. They're gaining public presentation skills, which we all know are invaluable. Being able to speak to a group of people is super hard. And students, you know, it's not something that students usually get a lot of opportunity to do. So, so having that opportunity is great. Adding that competition is fun, because sometimes when you make things like a challenge, it gives you something to lose. You know what I mean? So having that competition element can sometimes help students become more motivated to get this project done. And sometimes having that element kind of increases the efficacy is a word that it's written on this page, and I don't know if I've ever said it out loud before, but there we go. Efficacy of having that civic involvement work, because you have that funding to help back you up. You don't feel like you're doing it alone. So it's a really good tool to use to kind of help see that civic involvement through. So the process is just the same as it is with Earth Force. You do all of the same tools, you just add that challenge at the end. You have to kind of develop a budget a little bit more maybe. And there are some milestones you have to set as far as like sending in reports or sending in proposals and things like that. So there are just a couple extra steps, but really the majority of them are the Earth Force process that you have already kind of gotten some knowledge of. There is a process, a RISE challenge that's going on right now pretty much, or it can be going on this fall, winter, spring. If you would like to be involved, here we are, October 5th and 7th and 6th for some of you, the folks that came to our office hours. Thanks, Peggy. You're already in this hitting this milestone of that professional development. Then you would kind of pick your team here. And then winter, you would begin your discussion, investigation, and research. So you're already on this track to become involved if you would like to. Spring 2022 is when you would have that written proposal deadline. Look at this, March 2022. That's so far away. You have so much time. Look at that. And then that summit where you would actually do the presentations and stuff like that is not until May. So there is some time if you would like to develop a group and involve yourself in the RISE challenge. You're kind of right on schedule, and that's great. And then kind of where to begin. You're right here in the where to begin presentation, but there is going to be not in person, thanks, in person for us, a virtual presentation on October 21st, and I can get you a link to that and put it in the chat. But there will be an October 21st virtual presentation question and answer session where you can get more information if you would like. And one thing that I didn't really focus on, but RISE Challenge it's asking you to specify your project so that it's covering specifically like natural disasters and things like that. So that would be flooding. A lot of times there's other RISE challenges going on in like Colorado and Montana. And so sometimes folks will focus on like fires. I can't remember what the projects were that they did in Montana last year, but a lot of Illinois, because it is backed by FEMA, there are a lot of resources for flooding. And so it can be something as simple as like improper drainage in your schoolyard, where your runoff goes in your neighborhood, how you can help divert that runoff, things like that. Things like even like rain gardens to kind of protect your the chemicals from the street level going down into your drainage. So there's a lot of simple and complicated projects that could be done, but RISE Challenge does want it to be focused on a natural disaster element as well as environmental. And you already know about all this stuff. These are all in issue investigation. These are going through your steps. So let me pull up, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to drop a link to that October 21st info session. So anybody who is interested can definitely attend that. And we can, hopefully you're interested in moving forward because it is a really cool program and it does offer some benefits to the teachers that maybe you wouldn't get if you're just doing the Earth Force system on its own. I think that's all I got, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Nat.
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, okay, now? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
They weren't charged, but they charged really fast. So there you go. We have some guiding questions to kind of go through that case study worksheet we assigned everyone on Tuesday, which if you didn't have time to really go through it fully, that's okay because it's a small group of us. We can go through it all together. But I'm going to pull up my slide really quick. Oops, 1 second. But we're gonna basically use this a lot of the time today to model the Earth Force process together. So for anybody with implementation questions, I think this will be helpful. It could even be, rather than just focusing on these case studies, we could talk about your specific cohort of students or your organization as a case study and maybe build out how that process could look. Whatever is more helpful, honestly. I'm sure Nat and Kelly would agree. We're down to do whatever is most beneficial for everyone involved. Sorry, one second. My computer is freezing. Thanks, Apple.
Well, and I'm going to encourage Peggy to go first.
Oh, can you let me share really quick, Kelly? Sorry.
Only because you fit the model of what Rise, she has some great ideas. We did go over, she came to office hours yesterday. And she had some questions and I think they were great. So my only thought is I'm going to put her on the spot and she's really excited. I can feel it, but go ahead with your questions, Danny, but my thought
can you give me screen sharing permission?
Oh, yes. I think I did.
Forgot about that. Tell me you disabled it. What's the truth?
There you go. How about that?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
So I just have a few guiding questions here. Basically, how did you approach your case study if you did tackle one? Meaning, thinking about this Earth Force process, how did you break down this specific issue? And then the other, we can go this one at a time, but we can preview all the questions. Was there a particular step that you struggled with? We'd be happy to go through something more in depth or revisit some of my slides from Tuesday and kind of rediscuss certain pieces, or point out some different resources that might help clarify them a bit. And then additionally, I'd love to know if you had a chance to go through the different Earth Force resources available on the website and the Educator guide, what you found to be most helpful or least helpful. That's also good for us to know. But yeah, so those are the questions. I'll leave them up for a bit, but as we really get discussing, I think I'd rather see everybody blown up a little bit bigger. So any initial thoughts or shares? Peggy, if you're willing to be put on blast.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay. And my volume, everything's always different depending on where I'm at. Yeah. So first of all, yeah, brownie points. I tried to get those, to office hours because I knew my day to day, I got my questions answered, but couldn't get to the homework to finish, but where I got to. So I kind of did this a little backwards. So I went to the Rise. I did the Rise workshop, the info workshop. And I just made note in case I need to. I'm a reviewer. I have to hear it a lot of times. And it fits a bigger grant situation I'm in, all about watersheds. We flood here where I live. And I wanted to do an after school club because I'm not a formal educator. And it just all layered together. I have a teacher that already has a club in place. And that's the one I was talking about on Tuesday. It's all girls. It's called G-Force. So it's all girls and it's all STEM, and we're going to embed this. So when you were talking about in your presentation that it takes, 10 to 12 or 10 to 14 visits, 10 to 12 visits, that one meeting after another to build this the best for them to, to have it to carry forward. Well, I've got from next week to May. So I can go into any of those spots. So this is all coming together and I'm very lucky that's all kind of in place. I don't have to create it. It's there. I just have to do it well. And that's of course the stressor. So I took that first one, that case study, the A, and I didn't find it too difficult, except I was looking at it from my perspective without getting input from the students. So right away, I felt like I was taking over my own process. And I put for strengths, I just went through the steps and the community and inventory and just natural space nearby. There's a natural space with a path. The sidewalk floods. So kids who are walkers, if you are less than a mile from a school here, you can't ride the bus. So any kid in town that goes to the only middle school has to cross a creek that floods in the spring. And then they're all on the other side of the gas station and a bus goes back and forth with them. And these kids are going to be 6th, 7th, and 8th. So the 8th graders may remember it, but the 6th graders will be new to that problem because we won't have a spring until next year. And it's not every single year either. The methods I was thinking, we would select something around water, whether it's water quality, whether they want to do, I'd like them to do PSAs and hear their voices and explain to people that we are in a considerably important situation with lack of recharge. So a lot of education on watershed and recharge and all that science. And then I'm bringing it down. The more I talk, and learn this stuff, I'm trying to bring it down from this massive project to something, but it's up to them. But one of the options is that they would do water testing. I run a nature center, and I put in the grant to take them on a field study to do all the water quality testing and the macroinvertebrate steps, even if it's not the right season, to do visual inquiry of their neighborhood, because their school is part of a neighborhood that floods. Local water experts. I have Kelly and I found out we both know Trent, Dr. Ford. He's our new state climatologist, and he's part of my U of I extension world. So lots of resources. And then my biggest point when I got to issue selection, my biggest thing that I want them to get out of this after the type of years that we've had, and this is the underlying, has nothing to do with the topic, but I thought about it, and really what I want them to come out with when they are deciding together democratically, I want them to get to the point where they realize that they have to pick something to help them understand that doing the right project that's the most applicable to the greater good for the most citizens versus what they really want to do themselves. Oh, I want to plant a rain garden. Is it going to make a difference? Can you educate people with it? What would be more effective? And because NGSS, there's a big spot for water in 4th grade, in my head, I put money into this grant for them to do the kits and design water saving, kits for the homes of 4th grade students to tie into their NGSS work. They would package, measure, see what, that whole bit. There's options. I'm trying to be, leave it up to them. But I really want them to understand it's not about what they want as a group of girl citizens. It's what makes the biggest impact for the most number of community members. I'd have each student prioritize suggested issues to be solved, and then take the top 2 or 3 depending on what they are, and then go through a pro and con, and try to help them see how to go through pros and cons after they've already I want this and I want that. Take those we voted and here's the top 3, and now we have to go through and reevaluate them again. Do it more than once so that they have time to really break it down and add input. Then I got kind of stuck and it was time for office hours. So for 4 and 5, and I didn't get time to go on the website. I've been on the website and I love it. My boss took my hour and a half that I had set aside today with a phone call, and I can't tell her no. So, but I think it's all going to come together, but I'm like everybody else. I just want to implement it well. And I have the option of taking as many days as I need. I'd love to try to do it all. So I'm better if I've done it so I can do it again. So that's my hope is I'm going to have, I can have 2 of them a month. I can have 3 of them. I'm hoping it gets to the point where the girls are like, can we just work on that project and not do all this other STEM stuff? Because that's, they do all kinds of science and stuff, which is important. But that's where I'm at.
So cool.
Well, we'll see. I'm excited, but the club starts next week. And I'm going to meet with them. There's 2 people doing it. I'm meeting with them next Wednesday. I'll miss their first club date, but I'll be in on the next one. So I'm not panicking, but want to do it well. First will be introductions anyway, right? But
yeah. But Peggy, it sounds like you've really figured out exactly how to implement this, which is really awesome.
I don't know. I just wrote a grant, and those never happen. And now it's oh, I have to answer.
I think I can speak for everyone, Peggy, when I tell you that you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Well, I'm better at vermicomposting, Natalie, if you want to.
How good are you at knocking over your microphone though? Because I would like to say I'm an expert.
One thing though, I don't want us to get caught up in trying to do it well. I think what's really important is to just do it and know that there's a lot of support and a lot of resources for you. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. If we all said, raise your hand and say you want to do it well, don't get caught up in that, but know that everybody's here to support you, and you just got to do it. And even if you make some mistakes, that it's still going to be okay. And it still will have that impact on students that you want,
I just don't want to guide them to what I want. That's how I make sure it's very.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing.
Yeah. I want the RISE challenge too. So I'm aiming toward that flooding, or at least water, and that, because I want them to see that they can do something like that and then implement, and so I'm kind of going at this backwards from the RISE challenge this direction.
I don't think there's any wrong way to do it though. I think that whatever way it works in in your planning and in your mode, because that's how it's going to be successful, is it has to work. It has to work for you. And if it's running counterintuitive to how you plan and how you operate, it's just not going to happen. So it's really important that it just fits in how your planning works and how your system works.
Right.
Totally. And the other thing too is I really like, Peggy, that you emphasized wanting to get students to think outside themselves and really consider what's best for a community rather than what's like most fun or most interesting for them, because it's such a big part of this process too. And it's so crucial, I think, for young environmentalists to learn that early on, because we have a lot of older environmentalists who still try and implement, projects that they like with funding that don't actually necessarily meet community interests. And then we have this like community engagement nightmare, and we have what we have in the environmental world with discrimination and people not feeling welcome in groups, right?
Right.
It's so much of what we're trying to like backtrack and fix now is like the grown-ups in environmentalism. But if we can get our youth to be leaps and bounds ahead of us in that would be amazing.
Exactly.
No more like unused public parks that nobody asked anybody about, or bike trails that lead to gentrification. Let's just get everybody's input and take it seriously.
Right.
I think that's awesome. And it really also helps create something that is student led. And even, and sorry to speak also to the not worrying about doing it well. Even if you ended up not being able to implement a project, the fact that students modeled this process is so big. I mean, this is such a huge educational boost to have this level of community engagement work so young. It really helps you understand how change is made and how these systems work.
Well, I'm hoping with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that, because Jody and I are about the same age, the main teacher, so we're not going to retire until we retire about the same time. So I'm hoping to so when the 8th graders move on, they take what they've gained to the high school, and there is a watershed course that we're trying to fill, and that's what this is also about, getting them interested enough to get into that coursework. But also then there's left behind club members going, ooh, what are we going to do this year? So then we can do some other project related. We have time, to do other projects. So
yeah, even building upon the first one, right? Maybe the next, the 7th graders become 8th graders and they see a new thing they can do to expand on the project they did with last year's members. I think it could take a lot of shapes. And it's funny too, my program timeline is kind of matched up with yours. I start my after school programs in person with one of our partners next week. And I'll be working with both a high school and a middle school cohort. And I'm going to try and implement it with both. But I think it's going to end up being more like I'm modeling what a community engagement and problem solving process looks like, because I only meet with them like twice a month max.
Me too. I hope.
just as like an activity, if we end up creating a project that they're really passionate and they want to carry it out, totally, but not putting that pressure from the get-go, more like this is how we solve problems. And if we really think we want to do this, we can. If you want to just learn more about how to be a change maker, that's also really cool.
When was the timeline for Rise? If the kids decide, yes, they want to try that, what was the timeline for having that idea down?
So project proposals. Let me just pull on my phone here. You got it?
Share it, Nat.
Oh, what a great idea. Let me go.
More helpful than these questions, I think.
Absolutely. So Rise, where did it go? Sorry, again, I'm in PDFs. There it is. Okay, so we're here.
Got that. Yep.
And then this is when you begin your program, winter. So you still have time. You're still doing great. And then if you do want to write a proposal, and again, all of those folks that write proposals do get assistance with funding those projects. So that's here.
Right. Okay, perfect.
And then you go through your project implementation after that. And then if your girls choose to do a presentation, that deadline is, you would do the presentation deadline, the video presentation here on Earth Day. And then there's a summit where I can't remember, Kelly, do the kids present again at the summit?
Yeah. Or do they get like feedback in the beginning. And then let's say we get like 25 submissions, everybody's supposed to get funding, and like the top ones that are in the running will go to the summit.
To get the
but know that, because Earth Force and Rise just started in 2020, everybody that submitted last year got funding and came to the summit. So just kind of know that. And I suggest that everybody go to that Rise.
Let me show the website here. I've got the site pulled up.
Even if, you know, you said, Peggy, it's good to like repeat. Now that you have like fresh eyes, you know, you may want to go back and get feedback from Abby when she does that event.
So Rise Challenge, EAI is the home of Rise Challenge, so in Illinois. So all of the Rise Challenge information is hosted on the EAI website. And if you go to trainings and events, it's down here under Rise Challenge Illinois. One thing that I forgot to talk about, but I was going to talk about during resources after I had remembered, is that there are a whole bunch of Rise specific educator resources that you have access to through this website. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you really quick, did this switch to a new tab for you? Sometimes I wonder if it happens. Okay. It talks about, it shows, here's our top winners from this past year. The first place. What?
It's a really great idea to get examples and to show like the impact on students and hear like them present. It's amazing. I highly recommend.
And so this is the whole, I'll put this in the chat as well. And I will include all of this in the Moodle, the virtual event link I just posted in the Moodle today. So all of this, I'll put all of these in there so that you can get to them and you don't have to watch this recording or try to remember or find an email. I'll put it all in the Moodle so you know where to go. But like, look at this. The top 5 finalists got flipping grant money, you know what I mean? And you can use that for whatever you need to for your school, I believe. So, you know, it's, and each of these presentations is hosted here. So you can do that or through the EAI YouTube page. So feel free to check those out and I'll put that link in the Moodle for you as well.
Does anybody else want to share their thoughts and how they approach this or how they're thinking of implementing this?
I'm going to mute myself just so you don't hear all my clicking. Sorry.
If you want me to go, I can go.
Great.
My process is a little incomplete at the moment, but there's still some progress in it. So I went with case study number letter C, E. coli in the water. However, I'm changing E. coli to just bacteria at this moment too, just because of a site that's interested in creating a green team, a youth green team in Chicago at Bubbly Creek. And so maybe you want some context on it. Bubbly Creek, it bubbles because there's a lot of bacteria because of the meatpacking industry in Chicago in the past. And so this is a rowing team. And so if I were to define the boundaries, right, the boundaries of this project would be this rowing team who starts a green team and the community around Bubbly Creek and kind of the corridor that they kind of work at. So in terms of collecting data, one of the things was maybe collect data on the types of bacteria in the water. And also, may not have to collect, maybe there's a lot of data on this already. So finding research beyond your own testing too. Also, another thing is how many people are there like fishing, because I think that that may be a community that's affected, right? Because I've seen fishers there. And not only like counting how many people are there fishing, but maybe just inquiring, like, are people taking their fish home? And do people know the history on like Bubbly Creek? This is some of the data that I'm thinking about at the moment, both qualitative and quantitative. And in terms of now, step number 2, right, it's identifying the problem. I feel like you can approach the problem in many different ways. One can be like directed towards like the fisher people. Don't want to say fishermen. People who fish there. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think about, how to phrase that problem, right? Because like you also have a row team there that's like constantly rowing on top of Bubbly Creek recreationally.
Yeah.
And I mean, like in Chicago, people.
Oh, go ahead, Caesar.
I was gonna say in Chicago, people are not really like swimming in the rivers, but like, hey, what if we want to? I don't know. Maybe that's illegal. Probably got to research some of those policies too. Anyways,
Yeah, well, this is where like
ahead.
all of that research kind of helps to inform that list too, right? Because as you're going through that process with students and they're finding all this information, that's where you create, you know, you go from an idea of an issue to a list of issues, right? And then you narrow down to like the issue you want to solve. So that research process is really going to build out your answer to the rest of the questions too, which is nice. But you're already thinking about it like perfectly.
Yeah. You're like right in the like identify stakeholders portion of this,
Yeah.
right? And what a great opportunity for a field trip, for a trip to that, and students can just observe and say, I saw these people using it, I saw these people using it. There was evidence that people were recreating here previously because I saw this, this, and this. So these could all be potential stakeholders. And, you know, as you were saying that, it was triggering, the Des Plaines River just had this whole, it's a great, if you are interested in this, or in this project in general, the Des Plaines River went through a whole transition from basically a similar problem. It was like, it had like a horrible spell and it was like orange, and then they completely redid it. And if I can find information on it, I'll put it in the chat because it's a really great story. But then, yeah, you start looking and you're like, oh, we had other rivers in this area that did the same thing. What did they do? Are there things that we can use? Are there people we can contact to find out more? And who were the people that triggered that project? Was it, in that case, it was also recreators, people that wanted to row in the river, people that wanted to use it without having to smell the smell, people that wanted to actually touch the water without having it like literally burn their skin. So, you know, you can definitely find some resources there too. But yeah, you're right in that correct spot of identifying stakeholders and stuff like that.
Cool, yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, please send over that resources to on Des Plaines River. And so also when I'm thinking about like solution, you know, there's a few different types of solutions I feel. One might just be simply like education, like making more people aware of this. Another might be like an organizing type of solution where you organize an event at Bubbly Creek to get the attention of the aldermen and local politicians.
Yeah.
And I think the most ultimate solution would be like, I mean, somehow getting ecological restoration project going in that space, which I think the city is already thinking about, but it's like so like toxic and wasted. They don't like even know if they want to even try it, you know? So this is like the solution area I'm thinking about.
Well, and Cesar, you incorporate so much art into your students' projects and you're so arts focused. I feel like education and like public outreach is a great zone for your eco ambassadors. I mean, knowing like what you focus on in Chicago and what Candace has been really passionate about in Lake County, like if there are educational campaigns created that are like works of art or like music, you know, doing a public event that's like a festival or like a concert, you know, there's so many creative ways that would be like really, really fun for students to organize if education is like the thing you want to focus on, that I think would make great projects and really be community based, right? Getting that different stakeholder input. Maybe there's tabling from different groups. Maybe there's speakers, like a local alderman could be a speaker at the event, right? It could be a really cool thing.
I like that. I like the ideas of like, especially for our group, like ideas of festivals, like off topic a little bit, but we're also thinking about fashion, right? And fast fashion. Like we were thinking about running a fashion show, like with, you know, secondhand use fashion and having education about fast fashion. Like I like to do like, okay, so going, I think, I don't know who said it. For one of my things, I want to center joy in our curriculum. And I want the youth to do what they want to do, even if it's not the biggest utilitarian like impact and point of view. Because they may be that community that is experiencing, I don't know. That's something that
Cesar, I think my closet just became validated with what you just said. Woo! Fast fashion. When you said that about artwork, something just to integrate it's because a lot of these might be on water. When I was gone this past weekend, you know how when we get into these upper levels, you get invited and you can do a poster. So you have to cram everything you know on which I think is, a poster to me is more joyful and more colorful, but those posters at those places, to read them, it's like you have to have a hand lens. But I think, and they're scary when you first hear about them, like, what, a poster? And I want my kids to, if they get into academia, they understand that poster process. But what I found, and you will never be able to see this, but it's probably backwards.
There you go. Okay, yeah, I see it.
It was
Water,
I don't know who did it. It was at
Soda.
some hippie farm that I was at, getting like grass-fed beef or something. But on the wall, it's a water ethic for Minnesota. And it's like, health is rooted in the health of our soil and water, honor local ecological and indigenous knowledge, perennials in the landscape. And I'm like, I'm going to have them build that in as their poster reflection versus a scary one. But when they hear it later, they won't be like, oh, I've done that before. They're going to be disappointed that it's not art. But I just thought that'd be a really cool way for them also, when they're early on and afraid to voice it, they can artistically show their process and then explain themselves, because then they'll be brave enough to talk about it because it's their own work. So that was just a thought I had.
Peggy, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think too, these different kinds of art projects can really help highlight student-specific interests. We get into it a bit in step 5, but the importance of kind of dividing up work amongst groups, and then students kind of get to flourish in whatever their interest is. So if you have like super arts focused kids that want to like make a zine or something, or like create some visual materials or handouts for the community, it's a great like place to put that kind of energy. If you have students that are more interested in the actual like talking and networking and reaching out to people, there's so many ways you can highlight students' talent and center their talents. And then in the same vein, kind of like you're saying, so either center that joy, like what they love to do, and then build this kind of collaborative effort out of it. It's a really great way to break down something into not only manageable chunks, but also just a way to make sure you're like highlighting the skills and the assets, right? Like we talked about last time, Caesar said that, your students' talent is an asset in a community of itself, right? Being able to highlight that through the project, I think, is so special. Kelly, you don't have to raise your hand.
I know, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't interrupt you either. One thing too, that I want everybody to kind of think about is making sure that when you create your portfolio or when you create your story, that the kids have it like digitally, so they can kind of carry it on past this point. So if they only have like a binder that everybody has to share, it would be more difficult to kind of, if they wanted to get into college and they want to show it, you should have it digital. You should have it virtual too. So make sure you take lots of pictures, make sure that there's a way that they can communicate their successes, digitally. So that's just something I think is really important, because, you could have this great piece of artwork and eventually it kind of deteriorates. But just remember that we need to keep those. If I were to apply for a job, I would want to say, hey, I was an Earth Force kid, like I would want to make sure that I had a picture of it or that I was able to promote it in the future.
And I think it's also great to encourage your students to take that documentation on their own responsibility too, with that journal, that portfolio that they would be building. And that's a great way for them to keep track of the process. So if they did someday, say when they're applying for college or whatever, applying for a scholarship, they can actually use the story and they have the documentation to build that story along with it. So I think that's great. As far as the Des Plaines River goes, I cannot find the story. I just need everyone to know, and I will continue to look. I attended a session on it at the 2018 Parks and Recreation Conference, and it stuck with me. So I cannot find it, but I think it was the Hinsdale rowing community that's doing it, and I'm on their page, and I'm going to go on the dark web in a second, and I will find all of it. And I will, Danny, I think, was having some trouble.
As DJ Khaled would say, they don't want you to know.
Okay, I think they do want me to know, Caesar. I think they want me to know. I think I'm probably just, maybe it was the Calumet River and I'm thinking it was the Des Plaines River, but I'm not positive. But I will just continue to talk while Danny's going, and we can kind of start to, I don't know if Pat, if you had anything you wanted to share, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have anything to share. But we definitely, this is a safe space to share no matter what stage you are at the process.
Well, I mean, we don't have a group,
Right.
so everything is kind of theoretical.
Yeah.
That's
So,
okay.
I mean, mine sounds kind of pathetic because I don't actually have a group to work with. So I was kind of looking at the third one with the E. coli.
Mhm.
And I was thinking how it would apply like to I mean, we haven't had a boil order in Belvedere for a long time. And usually if we do, it's just very short and they're just fixing a water main. They'll just tell you not to use your water. But if we did, and it was a constant problem, then, maybe I thought that the kids could, because you'd want to know your water was safe. That's, the big thing, but that they could determine was it always coming from one well? That's part of you can look up, I looked up, there's all sorts of places to check the watershed and all that kind of stuff. They can look at maps. But also that we have 33% of Belvedere. I looked this up yesterday on the census data.
See, you're doing a great job, Pat. You went on the flippin' census website. That's great.
So 33% of Belvedere is Hispanic, which is a really high percentage. And they even had 33% was English not spoken at home. They had that question. So, I mean, I was thinking, well, they could maybe, and I realized that this would have to, come through them, but maybe how are people notified? Does it just go out on the TV? Does it just go out on channel 23 or whatever? And if they are notified, if it just says, okay, boil water, well, what does that mean? What would be best practices for this is what you should do. This is what you can use the water for. This is what you can't, having it in both languages. Or then I was just like writing things down, but when we have boiled water orders, does the amount of water that Walmart sells go way up? And what happens to all those plastic bottles? Because I know plastic is a real issue for everybody.
For watersheds in general. And I think that could be a potentially farther reaching process. Like, okay, well then how is your water company, how is your water department managing your water infrastructure? How frequent are the boil orders? Are they happening because you have frequent water main breaks? Why are they so frequent? What is the process that's happening? I mean, you got some Nancy Drews that you could get up in that situation, you know what I mean, with some students asking more questions. And that's how problems, and we have had a lot of, I am in rural Illinois, we have water main breaks all the time. And there's literally zero information that comes out about them ever. And I'm like, okay, well, is it just because we have a bunch of people who are friends of friends that are working there and they don't have a ton of expertise and they're just doing their best? Or is there a farther reaching problem? So I definitely know how you're going with that, Pat. I think it's a cool idea.
So anyway, that's just kind of what I thought.
Right. Well, and that's a great example of, okay, you had a couple great ideas there. It's a communication issue. Are people receiving messages in their native language? Are they able to understand the messages? Are they able to understand the message, but then do they know exactly what they need to do? Okay, there's a boil order.
What does that mean?
Correct. Is that education happening? So there's that education part, there's the physical, there's the potential waste issue that's coming off of it. And then there's the physical investigation of like how it affects the watershed in the middle. I think it was a great job.
This is a great time too to tie in recent environmental justice issues in the region. There's so many histories of this happening. Recently enough in Chicago, in Little Village, the destruction or the demolition of a really toxic site was happening, and nobody in a neighborhood that lived right by it was told to close their windows. The message wasn't spread in time. It wasn't spread widely. It wasn't spread in Spanish. It was really inaccessible information, and it was potentially deadly. And there's really big consequences to this kind of oversight, to this kind of systemic racism, right? And this is such a manageable way to talk about that with students, because it's presenting something that's really big and can feel kind of overwhelming, like systemic racism or environmental
Right.
racism, right? But providing a way that you can prevent it in your own community, how you can take that information and create a project that's rooted in not only ecological health, but protecting your community from this kind of inequitable outcome, right? It's a really proactive way.
Yeah. So anyway, that was
Awesome.
kind
That
of
rules.
what I
It was
did.
great.
I am so loving everybody's ideas. This is making me inspired for my own programs. This is awesome.
No, it's great. And I think I think that with Earthforce, it's easy to be like, I did not know what I was doing, right? And I felt overwhelmed and I felt like it wasn't possible, even with the ideas that I had. But then you start talking about it and you figure out, no, there is meat to that problem. There is, there's something that students can grasp onto. And as long as they are given the space to do that exploration and grasp onto it, it's definitely going to work, at least in some aspect. You know what I mean?
Totally. And when you're defining those boundaries, the parameters of the project up front, you can set it to be right to meet these themes that you want to work on with students. It can be about, spreading information on local soil orders or water issues. Like how do you help solve these problems that you already kind of want to outline for students, but still have that student-driven decision making in what that solution looks like, in how that research process is undertaken, right? If your program needs you to kind of have that boundary from the beginning, this is a totally workable process within, a specific set of, or I guess better to say, like, if you have to kind of decide step one a little bit for your students, that's okay, as long as there's still that participatory engagement, that research component that students carry out. It can just be part of your boundary setting, and it works really well. And honestly, in some cases, if you're on a more limited timeline with students, it's easier because it's not a big, what are environmental problems that you've noticed? Go out and look, and then we'll come back and then talk about it. Maybe you don't have the time to do that part, and you kind of need to be more specific upfront. Oh, Natalie found the Bubbly Creek info. Nice.
No, okay. So I was looking
Oh, no.
at Plains River. This is Caesar's problem that he was talking about. And they do have an active Army Corps of Engineers project working on it, which is great. I think I'm feeling strongly in my soul that it was the Des Plaines River. I just can't find any information on it. We covered that while you were on your quick call, but I'm still looking. I said I was immediately going to go on the dark web and try to find more info, and I will report back.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Awesome.
So Anne, we know you didn't join us for the first session, but did you get a chance to work on a project, or did you not have that chance?
Sorry. So I'm struggling with internet right now. I was trying to pull up the case studies. Sorry, I just walked into the house. The house smells of sewer. We had a rain. Speaking of floods, so I think the basement must have flooded again today because we have our septic tank giving us issues. And I also don't have internet. So I really don't know what I'm doing, but I am listening.
You know what?
We welcome.
Oh my gosh, props to you for that.
Yeah, you didn't immediately. The fact that you didn't immediately leave the Zoom once you
God.
I mean, you're already winning, because I would have gotten home and smelled that sewage and been like, sorry, everyone, I have to go. And
I went downstairs and poured water in the drains. It looks like maybe the water was just in the utility room. We'll see.
Anne is the queen of multitasking right now. Good
Incredible.
golly. Great job. I would have left. I would have been like,
So,
no, I'm sorry,
but
today's
I
not
know
the day
brain-
for this program.
I would
Brain
have
off.
right out. Thank you for
So
joining.
I found it
Anne.
ironic that we're talking about floods. I'm like, wow, that's ironic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if you guys would like to
Very
know,
real world problem.
we had to address flooding in our own neighborhood on a small scale. I did not do a group project because the only students that I have in my house are small people that are in kindergarten. And so I did my own solo project, but basically we had to run all of our water away, and we developed like a little mini rain garden. But it definitely, like before, it was like having all the water come into our basement, which then comes into our sump pump, which then goes into the blah, 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 wherever it goes, wherever some pumps go. And it went out of my house, which then probably goes into the watershed. So we'd have all of that water that would flow off of our roof with the asphalt and everything like that. So now we planted all sorts of wildflowers and Illinois native plants all along the part where the water sits. And we have not had water in our basement in 2 years since we started doing it.
Nice.
So it's all kind of been soaked up by the increased, the plants and stuff like that. It's magic.
That's awesome.
Magic and science.
You love to see it.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
I think we should go back to Danny's last two questions and just kind of
Sure.
briefly discuss, what was something that one step that you found that was difficult? Or did you run into something that was harder than you thought, maybe?
I didn't know where to go when I got stuck. And that's when you're like, the Moodle and the website. I'm like, oh yeah. So there was a brain fart there. Sorry. I was doing really good. I'm like, I don't know where to find this information. I look at my notes. So that was just on me. It's just so much going on.
Well, and I think that's everything is so big, when you look at it as a whole, and then when you start to break it down slowly into pieces, that's when those resources can be helpful. So definitely, I think I think that happens to all of us with this process.
Well, I like things in print. I'm like the worst environmentalist. I even printed it in color because I want to make a whole little book binder for the future for this thing, and I want to be able to find it quick. I'm terrible about.
Well, you're going to reuse it, so that's that. You're not going to print it off a second time.
Well,
You're
and I
gonna
made
immediately
copies
recycle it.
for the 2 teachers doing the club. I made some copies of that beginning process so that we could be on the same page in the meeting, so I could get an agenda together. So we use our time there's a lot. And I don't want to be like a fire hydrant when I see them. So I'm trying to organize my thoughts to make sense to them as well.
Mhm. Did anybody else have anything that they struggled with, or a particular part along the way that they really were, or maybe they're still struggling with?
I always have trouble, well, and it's probably because I'm not actually working with the kids, but in the developing the criteria, it just, I don't know, maybe it's just a hard, so that the criteria is, so that they could vote on it and stuff like that. That just seemed like something that, I know their guidelines and like the guidelines should apply, but sometimes it was like, well, what am I supposed to put in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where it's good to have the boundaries that you set in step 1, because you can always use those as some of the criteria that you can put up front. Maybe you offer students the floor to determine the rest of it. But I think it's good to, include like timeline, cost, the basics, like what makes the project feasible. Maybe that's something you provide at the top, and then you open it beyond that for the more creative elements to students. Like, what else do you think this project needs? And that's where a lot of, there can be some guiding from you as the person who can see maybe the bigger picture and say like, well, I don't know that that's something we can accomplish in this time frame, or like, maybe we can't like write a law and get it passed in like 6 months. Like, maybe we need something a little smaller.
Yeah, a little more feasible. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Feasibility. Question.
Well,
Any
and
kind of criteria that leads to feasibility is key. Sorry, Kelly.
Oh, sorry. Know that there is an example strategy board as a resource in step 4. So if you go to the website, they actually walk you through, I think it's a flooding example, so you can get examples. But, I think Danny had a really good thought yesterday, 2 days ago. The strategy was like, what's safe versus what's accomplishable versus what's the budget.
Yeah.
And so I think those will also guide you, because you'll have the forethought being like, okay, we don't have $20,000, that you want to accomplish this goal.
Right. Like if you're Caesar students and they're like, well, we want to bring, Kanye West to do a concert to raise awareness about Bubbly Creek. Like, sorry, criteria 1, we don't have Kanye money.
This is a really good guiding,
Did I put up the right resource, Kelly?
it's in a grid format, so we're not there yet.
I was trying to be really helpful. Oh, is it this one?
Yeah, try
Grid
that.
lesson. The one that says grid in the title? Is
Try
that the one?
page down, see if this is the one, because oh, this is one, but there's one with an example too. So just know, Pat, that there's you'll work on that strategy grid, but know that there is an example somewhere in here. And how I know it is because I watched the video. So if you watch that, like, it's like 3 to 4 minute video on step 4.
Here, I have an example one.
Yeah, I did watch several of them. I just
Oh
didn't.
yeah, see, that's great. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, you did
that's
that one.
that's really great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so these slides are also available in the Moodle. So anything I've shared for the last 2 days or the 2 days of this presentation, they're in the key resources. But yeah, so this was, an issue selection grid done by the Audubon Society for a projects they were trying to work on. And student interest is a great thing to have on there. Maybe your students even break it down further than that. Like they know what their interest is. Like, is it arts focused or is it science focused? Maybe they have a specific goal. And then having the significance and impact. So getting to Peggy's part about kind of reaching beyond just the insular students being impacted. Plausibility, difficulty, can we, like I said, like write a law and pass it? Probably not in this time frame. That's just not how these systems work, unfortunately. Urgency, is this something that needs to be addressed right now, or does it have more time? And then the safety component that Kelly mentioned, thinking about students and their well-being first, like maybe a nuclear waste cleanup is not in the cards for middle school students.
Truly
but-
for anybody that's not trained in that.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe, a letter writing campaign to officials about how toxic waste needs to be cleaned up could meet that safety requirement, right? So it's, again, a great way for you to see how different ideas that are trying to address the same issue might be more appropriate based on your other criteria of time and money and interest.
And I think just one more thought about, the RISE winners, and I don't want to like downplay anybody's idea, but so the winner of the RISE challenge canvassed their community, and it was a community-based solution versus somebody who made a rain garden for their school. So just kind of have that concept in mind. So like, I know one of Peggy's ideas was doing the very same thing, this rain garden, but it's how you approach the community with that rain garden. Is it going to solve, your school problem, or are you trying to create a solution for the school community? So emphasize that it's not just a small sampling size. You want to, Peggy's wanting to use this rain garden to educate the students and their families and the community of school participants at a whole. Just kind of keeping that in mind, I think is really important too.
And there's a lot of tools you can use to make that process more manageable too, like creating Google surveys, creating online forums, and having students distribute things that way too, if like person to, door-to-door canvassing or like meeting people in public places isn't possible. I think especially in like Chicago, I don't know as much for the suburbs, but like our neighborhood Facebook groups are very active and people have a lot of thoughts. So getting a good sense on like public opinion, posting a survey in there is really helpful. I did it all the time in college and I always knew immediately how people felt on both sides about something pretty quick. It could be really helpful. So there's so many different tools and networks you can reach out to make sure that you're getting that community input in a way that's manageable for students, especially if you have partners too, other organizations who've maybe already done some research or polling with citizens about environmental concerns or things they'd like to see. Health departments have a lot of more questions now around these kinds of things, about park access or feelings around nature. So definitely think about them as resources. If anyone's based in Lake County, I'm happy to connect you to folks at the public health department who are doing that kind of surveys, those kinds of surveys. But even a lot of community organizations too ask these questions now about assets or things that people would like to see coming up and changing. So there's so much you can gain both through directly asking citizens and also going through people who've already done, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like there are groups that have been doing these kinds of surveys and question asking, and it's great to partner. And a great way to get speakers too, to come into students and talk about how they did that process. Maybe why did they want to add that to their survey? Why did they survey their, participants or their networks or clients or whatever? How does it impact, maybe public health policy? How does it impact the decisions made by that community organization and what kind of projects they take on? Again, all of these steps I think have really great ways to just hone in with students on how change is made in a community, how communities solve problems, which is not something you get in a lot of programs when you're young. It's something we, for some reason, only introduce in college, and even then, it's like sometimes a little too late. Students are already like tapped out or just not quite. It's a hard concept to grasp if it's not something that's introduced early on. I think it takes us a while to really fully understand community engagement. So that's my spiel, my pro Earth Force spiel, making more people and community focused citizens.
Absolutely. And if we didn't have any, I think it's just a review of resources after this. Are we doing a break? We're doing a break?
Yes, so we're going to take a break. If people don't have any other questions about the process. Oh, I do want to know if there were specific resources people found helpful first.
Yeah, I would like to know that too.
There is a break coming though. So sorry, I gave you a spoiler on that break, but it is imminent. We just have one more thing.
And if you weren't able to get to the website, I guess, let us know what you feel like, even in our presentation, what you felt like was a resource that you really liked, that you plan on using, anything like that. Any feedback would be great.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's anything. I don't mean that it's nothing in the presentation. There's lots of stuff, but the fact that I shared this with Kelly, the overall goal of that grant that this club thing's embedded in is a watershed education, pre-K through 12, right? To get it in the classrooms. And I had somebody, an older friend, EEI, well, why would you do that when there's Project WET, Project Wild Aquatic, and I said, who's doing it? Who's bringing it to the classroom? Who's putting it in the hands of every single student? What we're missing is the implementation, getting it. The teachers like me, I do Project Wild, certain things I like, right? I don't look at ODEER anymore. I do it differently because I do it with less stuff. But my goal is to take the best of the best. It's out there. I'm going to pick the order I want it, and then I'm going to go looking for it, tweak it, give it credit if necessary, because I used a lot of it, figure out that with the university, but take it to the kids. What you're doing is making sure I can take this to the kids. You're asking over and over, what's hard, what's easy. Here I am. I just wrote pro community engagement under Danny's name, along with polling and survey help, right? I have a person, not just a facilitator who learned how to do Project Wild, right? Because I feel like you guys doing this way, even virtually, I feel more apt to do this process than if you hand me another guide and I go, okay, I would do the ones you showed me, and then we would just leave it at that. So I think it's how Earth Force, how you guys are presenting the material, the confidence building, getting a little bigger, right? And knowing that you may be disappointed at the number of people who are here. I'm extremely grateful. We have more time, small group. I know it's a lot of your time for a few people. But
great
I feel
teacher-student ratio.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and I'm like just thinking, and like with Pat and I so close. I mean, if Pat wanted to come down, what short distance that is, and just watch some of these club activities to build up, she could potentially start a club with the school district, and I'm total shareware. If I got it. Notice I don't do jam boards the way new people do, young people. I do it on my door. That's a jam board right there. Like, that's a great idea. So I keep looking at going, that you shouldn't look at my process. But I think it's how you're doing it. It's not, I can go through a website, I can dig and dig and dig. It's the fact that I want to go to the website and dig and dig and dig. Right?
Oh, thanks, Peggy.
Well,
This is
great.
very flattering.
We are super flattered, and Peggy's going to be writing testimonials for all of us to personally put on our resumes and stuff. So thanks, Peggy.
I want to go help Caesar because I'm terrified of going anywhere it's busy. I like my rural safety zone. and he's like in the mix all the time. And I'm like, I'd be like, I gotta break that seal and go that way sometime.
Yeah, I think I
You're
will say I
invited.
really, I love it. I really do appreciate the way EEAI went about training facilitators for Earth Force, because I was reached out to specifically asked to become a facilitator because my organization does a lot of community engagement work and that it's really well aligned with the Earth Force mission. So there was a lot of intentionality around making sure there were facilitators who would just like read you the script and like not have context or not have more dialogue or, you know, intentionality behind kind of the message, if that makes sense. So hats off to, I mean, Megan Bowie from before for scheming and picking people to be asking people to invite to be facilitators. And also to Kelly for keeping us engaged and matching us with these different trainings. It's been pretty cool. And and again, it's so energizing for me and inspirational for me to hear what everybody else is doing. And it helps me think through how I'm going to use this process better too. So I love it. Another point for the communities we build, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think how, you know, to Peggy's note, when you do a Project Wild or you do a training, it's usually facilitators doing a lecture and showing examples. And so Danny and Natalie and I said, we want you guys to actually go through the process. So it's not just in a lecture format. And this is going way better than I think we ever had imagined. And I feel like we're creating a relationship with you all. And we hope that you use us as resources, like stay in contact. If Caesar and Pat and Peggy and Ann, everybody does a project, I want to hear about it. I want to know what happened because
I will attend your summit and watch your presentation.
right, definitely.
Yeah. If your students
And I'm
have
also
any
like, who needs help? Caesar, I'm going to come and
Yeah.
help you. So you're going to have a summit. I'm there. Okay.
Yeah, if anyone needs to like host a youth exhibition of this kind of work or like a youth
Oh, yeah.
presentation, we're happy to do it at Brushwood. Let me know.
Yeah.
I can only provide enthusiasm. I don't have anything like a facility. I just got a lot of enthusiasm for students learning these processes. So I don't like put me down for a facility though, or like expert resource. We already talked about that's not where.
Hey, you're a master gardener, so
It's true.
master's in the title. Synonym for expert, Natalie.
Okay. All right. I spilled the compost earlier. I don't know how to expert it.
All
I
right.
get hired as a DJ for enthusiasm.
Oh, good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Caesar's a
I
DJ
just-
for anyone who doesn't know.
I just got paid $950 for an hour and a half yesterday for my enthusiasm.
Wow.
Enthusiasm.
That's not bad.
If you ever need like a roadie to lug your equipment around, let me know.
All right, let's get back to so, Pat, you did some wonderful research, and I just wondered if you had anything in specific that really helped you with your project. I know you did that. I don't know if you can drop that link. You did a population survey. Is that right?
I just went to the census website.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I just went to I wrote it down somewhere. But yeah, it's just that if you just type in US Census and it'll ask you what zip code you want, and then it'll just bring up all sorts of data. I mean, just like the basic questions that they do.
Demographics.
Demographic, thank you.
Mhm.
And, population of the, of the area or whatever it is that, whatever zip code you're checking, that's what I did. So I'd looked there.
Totally.
Watershed Maps, I was kind of looking at, because you can find, if you go to the Watershed, the EPA, they have all of that information. So you can see how many wells there are in Belvedere, where the wells are, if they were.
Yeah,
if it
they have
was-
some great maps.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like maps, so
I mean,
tend to
if
look
you're a
for
visual
maps.
person, there's nothing better, right? If you're a visual person and like, I don't know where towns are. I will be the first one to tell you I am very, especially now that I live outside the suburbs, it's really hard to tell where they are until you see them on the map. I've heard of, I know where Belvedere is, thankfully, but I've heard of where Skokie is, but I couldn't tell you which region it's in or whatever. And so maps are just so beneficial.
Yeah, I thought Arlington Heights was north of Chicago until like a week ago. So
You found out about this, the Bears Stadium. Is that?
it's always, maps are not everybody's thing. But yes, the EPA website has great watershed info. They also have great maps for like checking out brownfields and Superfund sites within your area if that's something students are interested in. Always recommend mapping that out. That again is something that wasn't introduced to me until I was in college. And I was like, if I had been like a middle or high schooler and shown like the local toxic sites in my area, I would have been like so driven to do something. When I'm in college and I have like a billion other projects, it's harder to to really like think about that. But I think that's such a powerful thing to introduce to students too. Yeah. But
Either did you have any resources that you felt might be good to highlight?
I would just agree with Peggy, like more so just these conversations and brainstorming. It seems more of an incubator for me, and that's what I'm getting most value from. And like sure, breaking it into the steps, that's like helpful too. I'm like, okay, what's step 1, step 2? But I also think that the steps are like, I feel like there's a possibility it could happen at different times too, and not like in a linear capacity. But still having the steps laid out are good. But more importantly, just having the space to talk out these steps and having this incubation period is really helpful for me. Reason why is because our projects have been getting a lot of, in my program, been a lot of cool projects. But one thing that I've been trying to do is up civic engagement. And so just the idea of like also just sending in your program is also just, I think, very helpful. And I guess that's more of a core value than your resource. So that's
Thank you so much for. And then Anne, I don't know if you want to add anything. You can. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. I don't even know if she's still there.
We still got Anne. She's
I'm
still
here.
with us.
She loves
She's
listening.
got us.
I'm here. No, I don't really have anything to add right now. I'm sorry. I am trying to listen.
That's
but
okay. I just want to make sure you're included and we're not leaving you out. So we
No, you are not.
Okay.
You are not. I
your comment.
appreciate being able to listen and allow it all to soak in. I'm kind of that sort of thinker anyway. It needs to soak in for a while. So it's helpful for me to listen and think.
And as we kind of said a couple of times here, if after you are, digging into the program or evaluating it for how it would work, if you do need to do this sort of brainstorming, kind of thing, just get a hold of one of us, and try to reach out, and we can kind of help bounce some ideas off, and just kind of maybe, because sometimes it's hard to see the issue or see the problem until you just say it out loud to someone else. So definitely kind of feel free to use that resource if you need to.
Well, thank you. I actually just emailed the mayor of our small town where our school is at to ask him, what are some issues that you feel like, the kids could maybe tackle? Mm-hmm. So we'll see what he sends me, and maybe, we'll start presenting from there. So.
Awesome. Well, I think we can take our 10-minute break now. We'll come back together. It's 5:22 on my clock, so we'll come back together about 5:32. And we'll finish up talking about the last 2 steps of the Earth Force process, and then kind of wrap up some final thoughts and resources.
All right. So, see you soon,
go
pals.
Team. Get a snack, take a break.
Let me try.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to take the next, I don't want to say how long it's going to take because it might not take that long. I'm going to take the next amount of time.
Let's not limit ourselves, okay?
Yeah, but I'm going to take you through the last 2 steps of the 6-step Earth Force process. So I apologize, the way my screen is split, I'm going to be looking here at my presentation, but I know you're here. So sorry, enjoy the sight of my face. So we went through this process, right? Just to recap, step one, we were creating inventories, right? So listing out those assets and those issues or areas for concern. Step two, we were honing down into selecting an issue to focus on and then expanding that issue into a list of different policies or procedures we could tackle. So using step three, we did a lot of research. We started our stakeholder engagement, again, trying to get as much information as we could about this issue that we've selected. And step four, we were narrowing down and starting to decide what our action was going to be, thinking of policy. Now that we have all the research on these policies and procedures that are perpetuating this issue, what can we change? What are we going to change? And so we went through that. Another criteria selection to choose the course of action, which makes you arrive at step five, which is taking that action. So step five is where you are moving into designing and implementing your action project that will lead to a sustainable and measurable environmental change. There's two key components. The first being refining your action plan so that you're addressing that project goal you determined in the last step, and your strategy statement, which you made in the last step as well. And then taking action by doing the thing. So doing what you have outlined as your goal or your action. And this is a great time for students to break out into committees. We'll talk a bit about that. Again, like I mentioned earlier, assigning students into groups that handle the specific tasks of the project. So when I say refining an action plan, there's a great activity sheet for that, but you're restating your issue as examples here. So this one, the school throwing away recyclable materials being the issue. You're identifying the policy or practice that you have selected to change or elected to change, I guess. In this case, they said that the school district does not have a waste reduction or recycling policy in place, so there's a school policy that needs to be changed. You have a clear statement of the project goal here. We want blank to blank, which will result in blank. It's a good template for that. So for them, we want our school district to pass a recycling policy, which will result in our school no longer throwing away recyclable plastic. And then you have your identified strategy. So in order to achieve this goal, which we've outlined in our last step, we have this strategy. So in this case, in order to achieve this, we will present to the school board at a meeting and include how much money they will save. So trying to appeal to that stakeholder based on an interest they might have identified earlier. In the cases and the examples we talked about, your strategy might be you're going to have first user an outreach concert to bring people out into the space to educate them on the issues of that space, of maybe the water quality or what's being done around it, and to build some community and nature, right? Great. In the case of Peggy's example, our strategy might be addressing different key elements related to, depending on what the project goal ends up being. It could be an education campaign, right? We're going to do this poster presentation at a community event, or we're going to create signage around the town that lets people know about these issues. For Pat, maybe it's translating different service warnings into Spanish so that issues can be communicated more clearly and more equitably. This is where you're going to really kind of outline exactly what your action is. And then you have a list of tasks. So you have that big statement of your strategy, but we all know it's not just as simple as saying, we're going to do this, right? There's planning and pieces that go into that as well. So here, in the case of speaking to the school board, at a school board meeting, they've listed out their main categories of tasks. So the first one being researching the cost savings and amount of recyclable waste produced by the district. So how much will they actually save if they implement these policies? Securing a spot on the upcoming school board agenda. Not a really monumentous step, I don't think, probably some back and forth emails, but again, an important thing to happen, right? Creating a speech and presentation material. This might be a great moment for their group to have their students breaking up into different groups. Maybe they're each taking a chunk of this presentation that they're going to share. Maybe one person's really passionate about designing Google Slides, and so they're taking that over. Spreading the word that they're speaking, passing out flyers. Again, that could be a communications committee, sharing this information, inviting people to come and watch the presentation. And step five, creating a petition of our peers and other school district community members. So bringing in that community element again, students doing outreach to make sure that the school board in this case knows that this is something that people care about beyond just that group. So getting that community input, which I think is really cool. So that's just one example of how you could go through this refined action plan step, but this is a way that's really nice to outline not just your project goal, but also the actual components of your strategy to achieve that goal. Helpful for students in thinking through, we know that we want this, but how do we actually make this happen? What are the steps we need to take? There's also this great resource available. You can find it on the EarthForce website to help you structure out committees with students. So in this case, you know, recycling researchers is the committee group. So there's members, they have their own primary goal that is going to help meet the overall strategy or the needs, the multiple steps to achieve that strategy, right? It outlines the community partners or other committees that they're going to be working with. So again, if you've had guest speakers at this point, they might become more involved in your project. If you've had different community outreach tactics you've used with their students, this is a great point to follow up with those different people, have students practice some of the activities that are listed in the tips cards, like how to make a phone call is one that's really great, just like stuff that we kind of take for granted that for students might seem a little daunting, you know, like how do I call like a council member to talk about an issue, right? Or if I know that this person at the water reclamation district is really willing to help me on this project, how do I just call her office and ask, right? This is a great time to kind of reintroduce those student-facing resources, but it's also helpful for students to just kind of see exactly what they're going to be doing in their groups. So the resources they might need, is any of it money-based? They need to have, you know, a budget sheet. There's a committee budget sheet as well. That's one of the EarthForce resources that can help students kind of break down the amount of money they have to spend on a certain component. Maybe it's like art supplies for communications. Maybe it's, you know, speaker fees or something if you're having a public event or an honorarium you want to give to like a scientist who's maybe sharing some information. Possible obstacles, so helping students set realistic expectations so they're not, you know, surprised if they encounter any obstacles, thinking through those ahead of time, helping them to be a little proactive in that way. In this case, they said that maybe one of the people they want to work with isn't available or doesn't respond. A very important thing for students to be prepared for. If you are working with certain organizations or bureaucracies, it's sometimes hard to get on certain people's email lists or to get through to them if they have, you know, if they're very in-demand person. But it doesn't mean they shouldn't try. As well as creating a task list, a deadline to help students recognize, you know, a time frame that they're working within, and then outlining which students in that group are responsible for which task to be completed in that deadline time frame. Also, I like the little box here at the bottom left. How will we know if we've done well? You know, helping students set their own expectations for their group. You know, their own standards that they're trying to meet, so that they can have, again, just a really strong sense of what they're doing. I think that's really helpful. And that's step 5. I mean, it sounds simple to say it's the step where you do the thing, but we all know that doing things takes more than just saying you're going to do it, right? But it's really helpful in this step to utilize those resources and worksheets from EarthForce to help students outline exactly what doing that thing looks like. So you know you have completed this step when you have a detailed action plan for the project. So you've gone through that refining process and you've restated your issue, you've restated your goal and your strategy. Maybe you've edited it or refined it more clearly if that's necessary, and you've outlined the steps to achieve your strategy. You've assigned roles based on personal strengths, and everyone has a chance to be part of the collective effort. So again, to what we spoke to earlier, using this time as a chance to highlight students' skills, talents, and interests, and put those at the forefront of the project. The action plan includes measures to ensure project sustainability. So not something as simple as, you know, we're putting in a vegetable garden, but we don't know who's going to take care of it when X student graduates, right? That doesn't work. There has to be a longevity plan in place. So students have thought this through really, and they know kind of the either if it is a shorter term project, they know that and it's planned into it, or, you know, for the longevity of the project, they have stopgaps in place, or they have maybe somebody on facilities or a longer term staff person if it's like a school issue or a community org issue who's going to help maintain that project when they might age out of that program. And then students implement their action plan. They do the thing that they set out to do. That is how you know you completed step 5, really. It's when you get to that point. So just to kind of take a step out of this, I have a question here. So what tools do you think you would use to help students manage this kind of project? I showed some of these worksheets. You know, we've talked a lot about having them keep portfolios, but is there anything else you would want to introduce with students to help them kind of manage this sort of project? I mean, there's so many apps now like Discord and Slack that people use to organize and chat offline that could be helpful. Google Drive, even if you want to have like a hub of resources for students, can be really useful. But does anybody have any other thoughts and tools or resources?
Really quick, Peggy did have a question in the chat, and the question was, is our group considered the committee, or are there more than one committee in the group? And I'm guessing you're saying not our group here today, you're talking about your group, Peggy, that you're doing the program with. Our group is a committee. Our group is a hive mind here today, but your group, maybe you have a committee of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 students, depending on your group size, that is going to focus solely on communications. Maybe there's a group that's going to solely be working on the presentation. Maybe there's a group that's working on actual, letter writing, things like that. So you might have committees within your group.
Yeah, it might be more simple than that, and your group might all be working on a bigger component together. But yeah, so the idea is to break down these tasks or these, here, let me see if I can go back. I should be able to. Maybe not. Here we go. The idea being, these parts of the strategy that you've outlined, maybe breaking those into manageable chunks and having committees that work on each component, just to make the project easier for students to handle. So this would just be one committee, maybe out of 2 or 3 of your group, depending on how many steps you have, right? Or how many different components are in your strategy. So in this case, this was like the researchers group, which means it's also going to be the group probably that does the outreach to like the school board about getting on their schedule, making sure they can make this presentation. Another group that's going to work on that presentation, right? Maybe a 4th group that works on outreach to get people to come to that presentation. So you can kind of divide it up that way based on the student's interest again, right? Noticing what skills and talents are in your youth and what they gravitate towards, letting them pick their committees, maybe if that would work for your group. But also you could assign them if you feel more comfortable.
Well, and I don't know if you touched on this, but they talked about, like, when you create a committee, make sure you get student interest, but student skill and strength too. So if somebody's really passionate about social media, or if somebody's really strong in creativeness, then maybe they were the ones that do the poster session and, things like that. You go with their strength and their interest.
Totally. Totally. Sure I didn't miss anything else. Yeah, this step is all about breaking down, your action plan into more manageable tasks and then creating committees around those tasks to achieve them, so there's event planning, publicity, invitations, material and resource collection. Maybe there's more research to be done, presentation creation. If you have to build something physically for your action project, which might be the case in some things, or maybe if you're fundraising, if that's part of your project as well. Once you kind of identify all of those necessary steps, it's easier to form the committees and see, where your students can plug in and where they'll be successful. Task sheet. Yep. Yeah, and once students know what tasks have to be done, they can determine their deadlines, resources, and budget, which is built into that community or committee task sheet that I showed. Yeah. So we can move now to our next step. Can you all see my screen?
We can see your homepage, your desktop.
Oh, that's weird. Hold on. Try that again. How about
Now we can see it.
Yay, okay. So moving into step 6, which is honestly, arguably, maybe the most fun step in some ways. This is the time where you take time to celebrate what your students have accomplished. You're reflecting on the Earth Force experience. You're sharing the project story with the public. So if you're a nonprofit organization, maybe this is in the form of a blog post or a write-up you're doing for your social media outreach. Maybe it's going into your annual report. Maybe it's writing a grant report. All of that kind of stuff can be worked into this step, and students can be part of that. If you're applying to the RISE challenge, maybe this is where you're filling out those forms. It can take a lot of different shapes too. Maybe there's a poster presentation or like an expo at your school, an art exhibition. It could take the form that makes sense for your project. But it's really making sure that students recognize the accomplishments and the work that they've done, even if maybe the project didn't go as perfectly as they'd planned or exactly how they wanted, just acknowledging the amount of work and incredible effort they put into it and taking time to celebrate that. The fact that they've gone through this process, how much they've learned, really acknowledging their contributions and what they've done. And building that. I really like that that's built into this process, because I think it's really easy to be stressed as educators about achieving that final project that we don't always think about. The acknowledgement of the effort it takes, even for ourselves, you know, acknowledging our own effort, but also acknowledging students' efforts and contributions. And it's also to bring closure. I like that little sentence here. An important piece of the process is how it is brought to closure. How do you wrap this up for students, this experience? And there's a couple resources that can really help do that. There's really great reflection questions. There's a reflection document that Earthforce puts out, but I've just grabbed the questions from it here. You know, walking students through how well did the action plan work? Did it go the way that you thought it would go? You know, was there a hiccup that wasn't expected? Did you plan pretty well and, you know, and kind of anticipate a lot of the things that might happen? How well did your students work together? Were there conflicts that they had to overcome, and how did that go? Did they learn new skills as a result of that? Did they become closer together? Did you form a pretty strong bond in your classroom? Can you celebrate new relationships built out of this? What did you learn that would make your next project more effective? Are there lessons learned that could help students trying to do something similar in the future? Could you even create maybe recommendations for a future class that's doing a project that students maybe feel like they're contributing to the next project in a way, right? By leaving their feedback behind, their suggestions for the future. Or what could this evolve into? What could be next with the project or issue? What's something else that you would think that they think future students should look into, that another group should try and tackle? Or if you're working with this group again, is there something they want to tackle in the next year of programming or whatever it might be? And how have I changed as a result of participating? This is a great place again to incorporate some socio-emotional benchmarks or curriculum. So having students give that time to not only congratulate themselves and be proud of themselves for what they've accomplished, but really reflect on what they've gained from this experience, what they've learned, new experiences they got to have. Maybe doing some mindfulness exercises or just some kind of really cool meditative processes with students that are calming and also really confidence building, I would say. I think there's a lot of cool forms that this part of the process could take. So there's this lesson plan that you can get through your Earthforce process. It's on the website, but using those prompts I just read, reflecting on the experience and writing a project story. So there's a project story form. You could also use another template if you prefer. But this is something that Earthforce asks project leaders or their groups to fill out and then email back to us so that we can know how your project went, so you can share that story with us. I have a feeling that me and Kelly and Natalie would be more involved anyways, based on our conversations today and the way that we've been collaborating. But if we haven't been, we would love to know what you got done, what your group tackled. I'll show you this form. You can submit this Google form through the Earthforce website, just kind of describing the project, the outcome, and then Earthforce apparently will contact you once they receive your story. This part I don't know as much about, Kelly or Natalie, if you know more about this process, the actual project submission. But it's just a really cool way for the Earthforce folks to know what kind of projects are being done with this framework.
I think that they use some of that data to kind of focus on how the program is being utilized and what kinds of issues that students are focusing on. So they I think that they do some outreach to groups and maybe potentially use videos or something like that if they need to in promotional materials, but a lot of it is more data collection for them and for the reports that they do, hey, here are some of the issues that were tackled through this for their fundraising efforts and their partnership efforts and stuff like that.
Very cool. Yeah, so definitely fill out that form. It's helpful for this process and the continuation of the growth of Earthforce.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. They may need data collection for their funding to say impacting student numbers and things like that. So they would always appreciate that. And if you have digital things that you want to share with them, they would be happy, and they could use it in promotional materials for them, put on their website or in their videos. So just know that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is also where those portfolios that we've mentioned a couple of times, if your students have been keeping up with those, if you've been having a really strong kind of portfolio building process, that can come in a lot of handy to really just pull from that to answer all of the questions on that form. Step 3 is getting the word out. So like I said, having that public presentation, it might take different forms, again, depending on your project or your group, but inviting stakeholders, parents, school officials, media, you know, having students be involved in that process, but again, just really getting the word out about what students accomplished and the story of your project. Making sure that people know what happened if they weren't, you know, if they weren't aware already, they should be. Preparing students for that public presentation. So, you know, maybe this is a great time with students to look at different examples of past presentations. We can look at the RISE Challenge Summit. There's other videos from Earth Force of students sharing their projects. That's a great way to kind of help give students some context and some expectations about their presentation. Getting feedback from students on these different presentations, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they'd like to try and use in their own presentation, what they'd want to avoid. And then maybe you can create, again, a criteria or a rubric to help build and evaluate the presentation so students are ready to present to that public group. And then presenting it, you know, inviting community partners, inviting folks that were involved and those that you know, helped you along the way to see the story of this project. And again, if your project is like a big event, maybe that's what this is, you know, that's where you kind of have this step to share the story of this work, of the research students have done, of the information they've collected, and then your big event is their way of sharing that with the public, right? That's where they invite stakeholders who've helped them along the way, where they get folks from the community involved. That totally makes sense too. And I'm now getting to the end of my slide deck, but you know you have completed step 6 when students have reflected and feel a sense of accomplishment. So again, you've had that time to celebrate your students' successes and they feel acknowledged in the work that they've done. Students have shared their work publicly, so you've had that public-facing presentation that you've prepared them for. Students have written an action project story and you've submitted it to Earth Force through that form on the website that I showed you, and also maybe emailed it to me and Natalie and Kelly so we can see what happened. And you feel great about your students' experience and accomplishments. You feel as an educator like you did it, and it went, you know, I'm hoping it went great. If there were some challenges, you know how to tackle them next time, and your students feel like they've processed everything and have had a really strong and reflective opportunity. So this is, maybe I said in step 5, or I said earlier, this is the most fun step, and I stand by it. I think it's always fun just to get to celebrate and enjoy and rejoice and talk about what you've learned and how you've grown. So I had breakout group discussion, but we're a small group, so we can all chat together, because this is something I think it's easy to forget about a lot in planning projects with students, especially in informal education settings where you don't have so much time. But do you plan time for reflection and celebration into your projects with students now? And if so, you know, what does that look like? And I had thinking of your case study, how would you reflect on this project with students, but maybe thinking specifically about the ways we've talked about that we want to implement this project with our upcoming programs. How could we work in this, this time for reflection and celebration? What would that look like for us? Stop sharing. See everybody.
I can think of a good I can think of a good example of potentially like a already set in place with like a non-formal group, because I think that's sometimes where things are hard, is with these non-formal groups or these you know, not classroom settings. But like if you think about a Girl Scout troop or something like that, you have those badge, you know, those badge award ceremonies at the end. Hey, look it, we achieved this goal, we did this thing, and here's your reward for it. And if you kind of take that and think about, you know, it doesn't have to be an award that they take home, but it's a ceremony. It's like a, hey, you know, we did this. It's a day, maybe it's a free day, maybe it's a free hour where maybe you invite the subject matter expert that you use to kind of hang with the kids, and they can make a thank you note, or they can do whatever. Kids is the wrong word. Students is the right word. Students can make a thank you note, or kind of, you know, go over the presentation if they weren't able to be there, and kind of give that closure with that person that donated their time as well to you. So I think that there's some really cool ways that you can do it, but I was just using the Girl Scout example to kind of frame your
Totally.
brains.
And if you want to incorporate cookies into your final project in some way or in the celebration of it, I support and applaud you. I know
Carbs are always
at Brushwood pre-pandemic, so we didn't get to do it in the last 2 years, but and when we usually structure our field trips for the summer, we try and partner with our group so that the students come out, but then they come out again with their parents and families at a later date, so they can kind of share with them what they've learned, any art they've created, and they get to have a chance to be the teachers, right? That's how we help reinforce that information too, right? Students have gone through this project and this process and they've done so much, but now to get to share it out with other people too, they just helps to reinforce everything they've learned. And it's like fun. It's fun to get to have that moment where they feel like adults are listening and are recognizing the work that they did. And having that mutual respect, I think, is really crucial too, especially when we think about the way that we've cultivated a student-teacher partnership throughout this process, right? Treating students with that respect, because what they did wasn't just like a homework assignment. What they did was a really, really cool community-based project, and that's huge. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of adults can't figure out how to do that right? So it's really acknowledging that effort fully. Yeah, and we've done it before, and we've had like music and yoga sessions and like food, and it's just like a great way to have a nice time and share some space with others. So yeah, any other thoughts?
I was thinking too, as you were talking early on, that to keep me taking pictures is to put together a video montage for the girls, or in my case, this girls club, to see, and maybe halfway through, if they're starting to lose energy, show them where they started.
Mm-hmm.
And then how far they've already accomplished if they get kind of stuck or getting kind of, we can't make this fit, we can't get this to happen, they're not listening, whatever it is. You know, how do we work through that? Well, you can also do it partway through. And just do a really nice, set it to uncopyrighted music, and then at the night you invite, or the day, you know, have it, whatever the focus is, incorporate all their poster, whatever, and then have some kind of a dinner or just a big night for them, so that their effort, like you said, if we don't get to the point of an end product, we still want to make sure that they can see their effort, that it wasn't for no reason.
Yeah, you treat it like it was a research project, and that still is a great thing to share out. And maybe there's a group that will see the students' project, or a stakeholder that came and talked to students, that will help them make it happen next year, you know, that are really impressed by the work they put in, and they can work on it again in the future, you know. You never know what will happen.
One quick idea that I just thought of, especially if you have students that hopefully through this process, they will gain a little bit more confidence speaking in front of others. But if you do have students that don't want to get up and share, oh, I love this program because X, Y, and Z, there's a great tool called Flipgrid. We were potentially going to use it for this program, but we didn't end up doing it just because life. But Flipgrid basically allows students and instructors or group leaders or whatever to record short little videos of themselves, and you can have each student record a short video that says, this is what I loved about this program, I really liked being able to do this. They don't have to get up and say, and maybe you could put those clips together in some way to kind of play them for the group, if your students are comfortable with that. But it also could be a great way to record some of those things, maybe put it in the presentation or share it with Earth Force or something like that. But it could be a great way to not put kids on the spot and to allow them to share their opinions, but still have that video documentation, still have that little tool you can use later on.
Yeah,
and for years to come, you could say, this is what we're doing, this is why we want to involve you, and throw that in an adult's lap. Right. And they're going to be like, I'll make time.
And you know, too, once you have a presentation like that together, if students make a little video, if they make a slideshow, sharing that with elected officials, it's something that's so easy to put out on like Facebook pages, and, you know, really just spread the story of the students' work beyond even the one event that gets done. I think that's something a lot of groups like to share too. It's like a feel good, look at how amazing our youth are kind of opportunity. And it's just a great way to keep that inspiration going. Love it.
well, and I think I told Peggy this too, a way to keep everybody involved, and I feel like Google is just going to run the world at some point, is to collect everything in Google, where you can share documents and everyone work on things together. It's a place that you can put announcements, but know that there's like a Google Drives and then you can put your videos there, but it's the central location that everybody can be working on. So it's a movable document that, or platform. So if you're meeting like once a month, it still can be a place that's dynamic and changing, and you can add your resources there.
And if, you know, maybe a different instructor or a different group leader wants to do this program next year and you're not able to do it, or things change or whatever, then you can take that whole Google Drive and share it with somebody and say, okay, here are my resources I used last year. And then they have that access to stuff. And then that program is set up with a nice launch pad for how to be successful.
Absolutely. Great ideas all around, y'all. Any other thoughts on celebration or past, even like past stories of how you celebrated events or student achievements? We love to hear good stories.
I can share. For our celebration events, typically, I mean, in 2019, before the pandemic, we had brought like parents together with the youth so that the parents can also see what their youth are doing. For us, like, involving the parents are a big thing because we like to have parents and youth on board and like up to date on what we're all like kind of doing. And yeah, we also like made a little like hip hop song and we performed it. Yeah. So that was fun. That was actually the highlight. And then during COVID, our celebration events were like presentations, but I honestly hated these presentations because they were in front of funders and I felt like I had to justify our program to be funded using our youth. So it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt more like a showcase of projects.
I will say too, that is one of my least favorite parts of doing nonprofit funded environmental programs with students. But one of the most powerful things you can do is use your students' projects as proof, rather than, especially if they're doing artwork or creating videos, you can submit that as like outcomes, right? And instead of having to make your students, like, obviously because of COVID restrictions, you do the best you can do, but like using that as proof. And like I stopped doing like extensive student surveys about programs because I don't think it captures the actual impact of programs, and instead show the artwork that students made, share the stories from their experiences, the things that touched me the most as an educator, you know, getting quotes and input. And that reflective process can be a great time to get that kind of data without feeling maybe like you have to exploit. I know it's like, sounds like a strong word, but without feeling like you have to exploit students just to continue your funding, right? But you have all of this data from your reflection with students, their testimonies maybe that they give, or just quotes that you can tie into grant reports. I think there's a lot of powerful ways to use the portfolios that students keep throughout this process also as a way of proving metrics or proving impact, so that you don't have to just give presentations to funders and
I like that idea. I like that idea. I'll tell the funders just to talk to me. I'll showcase the projects and the photos and everything, you know?
Yeah, your superstar students have more important things going on, so they can't be funded. But I know exactly what you mean. It's the least fun part of the project of this line of work. But it is changing too. I've noticed a lot less funders I've seen are demanding like strict survey outcomes or metrics as a way of reporting, especially in light of the pandemic. And I think that's a really good change.
But there's also like a professional development positive to that end too, because I tell my youth, hey, there's money out here. And they're all interested in like the money, and they're all interested in like, okay, how can I fund my stuff? So I kind of just let them know too, like, hey, if you're gonna get funded, you're gonna have to report back to somebody, you know, unless we generate our own income, which I'm a big advocate for too.
That sounds awesome.
There's so much
But
money out
absolutely.
there, you know, like people just don't even know. That's what's great about the Environmental Education Association of Illinois, is trying to make connections. I know that's like part of what Danny's job is, but we have resources that we need and want to share. So it's really good to have this community and this connection and the networking. So just know that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, Cesar, this like assessment process, this reflection and submitting the report to Earth Force is another great way to model that with students. Like, you know, okay, you did the thing, but how can you effectively tell people about what you did if they weren't there to see it, right? And you want to get funding for something like that in the future. How do you document your success in a way that you can prove to people that you did it if they weren't there to witness the process? So I think that's it's a really good point to bring that up, like teaching students the value of documenting their projects for future sources of future funding, just to share with people for best practices. You know, if their students try to do a project in the future, being able to refer back to what past students did that was successful. There's so many great reasons to implement these kinds of steps for these procedures with students. Any other thoughts?
Peggy, did your cat have any thoughts?
Oh my God, she's a kitten. She's a year old. She just, I don't know what she's breaking, but.
I love when people's pets show up on Zoom. It's the best.
Yeah, she's,
Big dog waters.
we call her
Yeah,
Nala the
I
horrible.
saw
Oh, I always get suspicious when I see my dog walk past the door behind me, because that's the door to my room into like a bathroom. Like, what's he doing in there? I don't like that.
Nothing good.
Nothing good's happening over there.
Did you have more, Danny? I can jump in.
We have
yeah.
our wrap up and evaluations. Yeah.
Oh, well,
But if
Natalie's
you-
next. So Natalie,
Yeah,
just
but-
know we kind of you have like 10 minutes and I have 10 minutes. So
Great. Right
Very
now
good.
at this moment,
yeah.
okay, perfect. I'm ready. So ready. We already went over some of this stuff, but I thought that I would do a quick dive into resources by step, just so that everyone knows where they are, because if you are going to implement this, it's just so much easier if you can easily access this. Of course, as you can see, all of these links are on the Moodle. The Earth Force resources link is somewhere in here that I can't see it right off the bat, but our educator guide, which is basically your whole Earth Force in a book. You can print it off if that's your thing, or it's available for PDF viewing right here through this link. You can download it on your own computer. Your tips cards, and again, these are meant for students to use. So you can take them, you can laminate them, you can put them in a clear sleeve. Students can write on that clear sleeve, dry erase. You could erase them, use them year after year. So the tips cards are going to be, I have them open somewhere here. The tips cards are going to be specifically made for each step, and then it's color coded by what part of the process is really highlighted. So pinks are going to be project management help, orange is going to be course planning, green could be student assessment. So that's going to be those benchmarks that those are hitting for each tip. And you can see it's got a step-by-step. This is why you keep a journal. This is how to record your work. This is why it's important to keep examples. So that's some great stuff to share with your students or group members. And then, it'll be kind of different things along the way. These are great tips for Earth Force, but they're great life tips in general too. So these are kind of good project to just know for their whole life. So these are great things to have in mind in general. But when you are on the Earth Force resources, so again, that is just earthforceresources.org. And then I'm just here in Earth Force process, and this is step by step. You can also access it by classroom resources by step, and it goes through each one, but this is just the whole Earth Force process overview page. I'm going to go step by step really quick just to kind of show everybody, hit some of those notes that we talked about. Here's all of our stuff about inventories, making a community inventory list. If you are interested in doing RISE, this is a great place to find things about flood mitigation inventories specifically. Strengths and concerns, these things about questioning, identifying cause and effect relationships. There's tons of good stuff here in step 1. And then there's individual things by these 3 inventories to be specific: water quality, waste, and flooding risk. So they have got kind of a general overview on each lesson, and then a deep dive into the resources here on the bottom. Along with that, on each page, I think we talked about this on Tuesday, that there is a video about each step. So it's kind of a great overview to break down the process for you, and then kind of show you how that starts and how it's going, like that meme that we're all doing right now. If people are doing memes, I don't know, I'm just a middle-aged lady. So then if you go to step 2, this is your issue selection. Again, you have your video. You've got your little overview. They do a little highlight of a couple of different tools that you can use. I believe Fun Retro is not working right now. Did we figure that out, Kelly? I think that they're updating something, and hopefully it will be at some point, but right now it is not functioning. And then at the bottom, there are, here's your issue selection grid. That's, I believe, that thing that Danny shared from the Audubon Society program, structuring a debate, student to student, step to student assessment, post voting. And there's just some really great things there on how you can help select an issue. Policy, practice, and practice research. This one is chock full of resources. There are so many here. The empathy mapping is a great one. I love empathy mapping because it's about how people share emotions and how people are attaching to different topics. So it's great. And then research key element page is going to have over here is going to have more information about generating quality research questions, which might be really something that's maybe a sticking point for some of your students who have never developed a survey or investigative research of any time, things like that. So some great tools there. And again, this picture here, I think is so perfect for EarthForce because this is two officials here that are guests to this classroom that are filling out some, like, making notes and filling out surveys and stuff like that here with this classroom. So it's just like a great illustration of the EarthForce process. Step 4, we did a quick dive into, because I took over the screen and showed everybody all the resources earlier. And there are some really great distance learning facilitations.
I think you're on step 2, right?
What? No, I'm on step 4.
No, you skipped 3. Sorry.
Did I? Sorry,
yes,
everybody.
It's no problem.
I'm here on step 3.
Oh no, sorry. I
Kelly.
am so sorry. I thought I read something and I was like, wait, did we miss it? Sorry about that.
No, it's totally fine. Sometimes they kind of all look the same too when you're looking at them on the screen too. So this one's going to be all about democratic decision making and selecting one issue. You know what I mean? So, or selecting one strategy. I'm sorry. So there's, again, your videos up top. There's some great distance learning facilitations that are on this one, which is awesome because, it's COVID. So maybe there's a chance that any of us might be distance learning at any point. We want to keep those things going. They do mention tools like Trello. I know that Danny brought up Discord and Slack as two tools that if like your school has or your group has an okay technology policy, you can use those to communicate easier because, again, we want to meet students where they're at. We want to meet group members where they're at. And if they're going to be using their phone or technology to communicate with each other, let's go there with them. This is the place, I think we talked about it on Tuesday, but I do want to hit home that there is a great JEDI check, which is justice, equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there's a really great kind of worksheet here that you can use to figure out if you're approaching things as with an equity lens as well. So that's going to be hiding in step 4 down at the bottom. I'm going pretty fast, but this will be recorded and you also can search through these on their own. But this is also where that strategy selection grid is that we talked about. And then rubrics for project development. And then this is your post goal and strategy selection, how to assess those. Hitting step 5, this is your action step. This is when we're actually putting those plans into place. This is going to be writing your action plans, delegating roles and responsibilities, identifying a budget, which I'm gonna guess most of your students and group members have not done. So, like, what a great life skill. I wish someone was teaching me that today. So those are some great things to kind of hit there. I forgot about Kanban. Kanban boards are going to be a way to move your steps through the process. So if you imagine like a grid system on your left-hand side, I'm on my left. So left-hand side here would be your to-dos. Then you have your in-process tasks, and then you have your finished tasks. So your to-dos, maybe they're all on Post-it notes. Maybe you have a giant Kanban and Jamboard. Maybe you have whatever works for you, but you have all your to-do Post-its, and then a group member will move that Post-it to the middle and then to done when it's finally finished. Maybe you have them color-coded by committee or student or priority level with different colors of Post-its. It's a great visual tool to figure out what's been done and what still needs to be done. This is where you have your community task sheet, your community budget sheet. And then you're writing an action plan, fine tuning your action plan, community work plan. So there's some nice lesson plans here to go along with that process. And then here we are in step 6. This is going to be how, look, we have our little presentations here. We've invited people to come see them. We have, they have some tools here that about how to reflect on those partnerships that you did. Sorry, I got a weird notification on my thing. About how to make sure that everyone's connected and how to make sure everyone sees that they are connected through this process. And then there's some prompts and methods and things that you can go along through this. This is, there are some tools here, some suggestions of where if you aren't participating in RISE, there are some places where you can encourage your students to present these results, or you yourself can present these results. So here they are right here on this list. And those would be, you know, if you need help connecting to those, you can reach out to EAI. The last thing I wanted to hit is this, the pedagogies. Those are the different kind of learning, you know, different learning styles that you're going to hit through this, the things that they want to highlight. And there's just little tools and toolkits and things like that that you can use along the way, that are kind of best practices, commonly used tools, really recommended tools. So you can go through each of these key elements, and they're going to have little highlighted utilities that you can use through all of that, and resources that you can reflect on as well. So there's some really great stuff here. And then really quickly, I will just look back at the Moodle just to show you that we do have all of these Earth Force slides for each step along the way. There is your educator guide, your quick start, and your tips. And then down here, we did put all of those RISE. There's a RISE intro video. There's a RISE finished presentation that students did. I believe this one was from Colorado. Here's that virtual webinar that we discussed. Here's 2 links to RISE Challenge Illinois resources if you need them and you want to know more. And I think that's it. I think that's all I got, folks. Did you have any ones that that I missed? Any resources that I missed?
How long is the Moodle? Is it endless? I know sometimes I have things that, you know, when they end, there's only so
Oh,
many
like you
minutes
only
left,
can
right?
log in. Right now, this Moodle is set up to be for Earth Force, for every Earth Force lesson that we do
Okay.
forever right now. That's how it's set up. If it changes and the access is going to change, I'm sure that EAI is going to communicate to any educators about that.
Right. And right now, Natalie and Danny will continue to do some more Earth Force training. So they may add more resources versus hide resources. So we can hide some things. It may be like scheduling things that, you know, we had a training, I think it was in September. We're not showing those, but what will always stay is the resources. And those videos that were in the Moodle, just know that those are from Abby going through the steps, and she's highlighting. She actually goes into resources that are at the bottom of a page, and she says, hey, this is a really great resource. You know, this is what I would do, and this is how I would use it. So she actually put those videos together, and they're really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They are.
Are you done, Natalie?
I'm done. I have no more resources. Yes, I'm
Absolutely phenomenal. Way to go on a 10-minute. I think it was great how you went about it. I really appreciate that. It was even great for me. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's good stuff. So it was
if
amazing.
only this was being recorded. Oh wait.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna just wrap us up and say, I hope that you learned a lot and you feel excited and empowered by Earth Force. And even if you don't grasp everything, that you at least have this introduction and you're ready to come back with, if you have questions, just know that we're here for you. I was also gonna highlight the RISE event. So I think, Danny, if you wanna go to the next slide, it's, you know, just highlighting that RISE event, which is October 21st. We all kind of hammered it in. It is only 1 hour, so just kind of know that. There's also a RISE event, the summit all of those YouTube videos are on the website, the YouTube EEAI website, which is in the Moodle all the way down. There's the playlist, or you can just search EEAI YouTube. Make sure you look for the organization, and you can see the summit, and you can see examples, and you can see another RISE video that had been recorded, almost the same one that we're going to do. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Danny, which is like, don't forget to share your story. We'd love to hear about it. We love to hear, your successes and your challenges. And if you really needed more help, anything like that, any feedback is really important. And then what I'm going to end with is I'm going to send an evaluation, but definitely for the people who are still here, I'm going to put the evaluation in the chat so you can just like jump in there. So I'm going to do that right now. So one moment.
That's the end of our slide deck too, right, Kelly?
Yes.
And
Yep.
also, in case you did not see, Danny and I did share our emails in the chat. So if you are interested in reaching out to us to attend your summit presentation, or just really give you a thumbs up that you're doing a great job, you can absolutely reach out to us at either of those, in either of our emails.
And know that I'm the major communicator right now, but I can always connect you if you didn't get a chance to write their emails down. I can always forward anything because they have such a great grasp of everything. I feel like Danny has such a great like cultural knowledge and understanding, and Natalie is just like the best whiz on like connecting with technology, that they just complemented each other so well. So I really appreciate them being
Danny and I
on
just
here,
came
man.
tonight so that everyone would tell us that we're doing a great job. That's why we showed up, and goal achieved, to be honest, you
Yeah.
know.
We
They
did
should
good.
have said EEAI would keep hiring us to be facilitators.
Well, I hope I'm gonna, so I know that.
So yeah, please do fill out that evaluation. If there were helpful things about this program, professional development, if there were things that maybe didn't jive with you as well, please make those notes so that we can make adjustments. Like I said, like Kelly said, Danny and I are going to be doing some trainings in November, and we want them to be as effective as possible. So,
Yeah.
it helps us even when we get feedback that's not like, we like Danny and Natalie a lot. If it's other feedback, that's okay too.
Love talking to them. Would love
Yeah.
to keep talking to them.
We love
Just
to
know your feedback matters, and it is very important. It is, I think, Natalie, if you remember, it was like 18 questions. Most of them are like short form, multiple choice. And, it's just a lot of like, how did the training go? So
16 questions.
Oh,
not
nice.
even. Wow.
There you go.
3 minutes of your time.
So
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for being just really involved and awesome. And I hope we talk to you again soon.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Was
I'm exhausted. That means it was awesome.
yeah.
Like Kelly said too, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need anything from us. We're excited to support people through this process and see what students come up with. So
Yeah, it'll be exciting one way or another. Woo.
absolutely.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
care,
you very
everyone.
much.
Yeah. We hope you're
Bye,
motivated.
Anne.
Bye.
Your
Thanks
basement's
again.
not flooded.